Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us for our last session of today's Digital Stratosphere event. Definitely very excited for this session, as this is our senior management team here at Third Stage that does a lot of our client activations and strategy. So a great opportunity for you to join this discussion through questions in the chat box. So just real quick, just to make sure everybody migrated over, can you give me a thumbs up if you are here? And while you're doing that, I'm going to go ahead and let this team introduce themselves. So Braden, I'll start with you as you are our moderator today.
Yeah, hi. Afternoon, Braden Gerbig, Senior Manager with Third Stage. Spent a lot of time in technology, ERP, lots of different types of systems, quite a bit of time in operations as well. So happy to be here and join the discussion. Who's next?
I'll go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead.
Hey, everyone. I'm Allison Hopkins. I am a senior manager at Third Stage, and I focus on not only technology transformation, software selection, and change management, but I just really enjoy meeting all the variety of clients that we have here at Third Stage. My background before Third Stage was I built products for some of the leading ERP companies and deployed them. So I've seen how clients firsthand accept technology and the challenges that come along with that. And so I love to share those experiences with my clients to make sure that they're set up for success.
Thanks, Allison. Tony?
Hi, I'm Tony Ford. I'm a senior manager with Third Stage. I've been in consulting probably for most of my career, over 20 years. I've worn many hats. I've been a consulting executive. I run and managed and QA'd, any number of ERP implementation projects from soup to nuts, from IT strategy, architecture to planning and delivery and implementation. So I've got a lot of experience in the space. Currently with Third Stage, I do a lot of the similar types of things. I do a lot of implementation readiness, operational readiness, contract negotiations, project QA. Got a real big project right now where I've got a large implementation where I'm providing some trusted advisor type of QA to a customer. So hopefully this will be a good conversation around some of that stuff.
Great. Thanks. Mitch, you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, round things up. My name is Mitch Otterson. Hello, everybody. Senior consultant with Third Stage. My background is in finance, operations, and IT infrastructure. So really get to be hands-on with one of our projects and understand how it fits into our clients' technology ecosystem. And really look forward to talking to you guys today.
Mm-hmm.
Awesome. Well, I know everybody's got a varying mix of projects right now. I know today we talked about on previous sessions quite a bit around digital transformation as it relates to alignment. We heard a lot about KPIs, some of the aspects of change management, and then most recently security. I know each of our projects has a number of challenges in that regard. So, Tony, why don't you start? You mentioned QA. I'm interested in hearing more about how you're providing quality on some of these implementations.
Yeah, I've got a fairly large global retailer that I'm working with right now, going through a fairly large implementation. They've got a fairly large application footprint that they are going to implement at this time. So they've hired us to provide project QA, and the deliverables out of the process are we're going through a series of stage gates. They typically are lining up with project phases. And as we're going through, we're also providing a bi-weekly type of project health check. So it's been an interesting, ride. My experience is that each one of these projects always take on their own personality, right? And so certainly this one has taken on a fairly unique personality. So our objective is to work with their steering committee and their project management team, and trying to steer them, give them some assessments of what they're doing and what they're doing right, what they're doing wrong, throughout the project, each phase, and just like I said, try to be a trusted advisor and guide them through the process. This is the first project for them of this type. Had an interesting conversation last week with the CEO of the company, new CEO, and I was quite surprised when he wanted a one-on-one afterwards and talked about the project. There's obviously some things that are concerning with this particular project, but asked me for some specific mentoring around this type of digital transformation, because it was fairly new to him, and there were some things that he was not familiar with, but wanted to make sure that he was taking the right action and seeing what he thought he was seeing. So pretty interesting process.
Great. Allison, I know timing-wise, Tony, you mentioned every couple of weeks. Allison, I know you've had some interesting timing challenges lately. You could talk a little bit about how transformation occurs over the timeline.
Yeah. So one of my clients that I work with, and that many of you who are managing a team, managing a budget, you understand that there are certain milestones over the course of an initiative or an investment that you need to hit. And I think one of the things that, one of my clients is working with, that, they're making a selection. They know they need to hit a key time frame to get the budget set for 2022, to get approval, to get capital in the right places. And so you have to work backwards a lot of times from key initiatives and key milestones that are taking place in the business. And, when you think about selecting new software or selecting a partner, an implementation partner, there's a lot of activities that go into it to make sure that it's the right partner, and that partner is going to be able to understand your personality as an organization, and your leadership team, and really the biases that exist within a team. And so when you think about timelines and you think about all these complexities that come along with the team, a lot of times our clients need us to lay out that timeline, help them understand where the pitfalls or the risks, or where the executives are going to need to make a decision that may or may not be informed by the team. And so that's really what I've been going through lately with one of my clients, is keeping them on track, putting them on a plan to make the decisions that are going to need to be made to ensure that they keep their financial planning initiatives in check, as well as making sure that they're selecting the right long-term partner for this huge initiative. So, I think having advisors or having people on your team who really understand what are all those activities that need to happen, laying them out, and helping the leaders understand why they need to stick to their plan, or reminding them why they said they wanted a plan in the first place, is a lot of what I've been working on recently with some of my clients.
Yeah, it's interesting. I know we all have our project timelines, but there's also the client timelines, and a lot of what we do is long term in terms of their challenges associated, particularly with not only the system implementation, but the level of change that occurs during the implementation. I think all of our clients go through quite a bit of change. Mitch, I know you've been working on some changes in process recently. Maybe you could talk a little bit about timeline and how that impacts the client long term versus our quick project timelines.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. And I think Allison really hit the nail on the head when she was talking about working backwards. And one of the things that we've found when you're working backwards is that it helps to establish that the timeline isn't just the timeline we want, it's the timeline that actually works, and getting both sides onto the same plan and having it feel like it's a mutual plan is so important when doing these things. If it's just a third stage's plan, that isn't really effective. The client needs to own it, and working backwards is a really effective way of doing that. We've got one client who, they're in Excel spreadsheets and they run their entire business out of Excel spreadsheets. And it's going to take some time to pull all that information out of those spreadsheets and actually understand, what's the information that's in here? How are you using it? How are you operationalizing this data? And how do we put that into a system to allow your folks to make informed, data-driven, real-time decisions? And that sounds great, but it can be a painful process going through, and you really need to take your time and do it the right way.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree. So much of what we do depends on, whether it's a busy season or the nature of the business, the cycle of the business. And it all is interconnected in terms of people, process, technology. Those are the three areas we like to talk about quite a bit, I think, on each of our clients. What do you all feel is the biggest challenge in terms of digital transformation? I know for myself, alignment was a kind of how we started the day, but getting those areas aligned, starting kind of at the vision level and then getting down to the goals and objectives of the business, and then getting the technology to implement along those lines, and getting the organization to start to gel with that new process or that new technology. What are you guys seeing currently along those lines?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that, Braden. So I think one of the bigger things that I like to talk a lot about is that making a decision in technology is a big decision. A lot of leaders ask for their teams to buy in on that decision. They feel the pressure of making that decision. And once they make the decision, they think, oh gosh, we went through all of this work of requirements and alignment on objectives, and now we've chosen a partner who's going to be able to make this all happen. And they don't really recognize that the harder part of a transformation is the people, and setting up the plans for people to be successful, to understand what is this new way of working. How is my job and how is my role at this company going to evolve when the things that I do today no longer look like the things that I do today? And so setting up the leaders of the company with a plan, a communication plan to articulate what the future looks like and what it means for those team members is something that I really enjoy doing. It's one of the things that makes people a little nervous, because you're talking about, these are the conversations you need to have with the team. And this is how you have with the team. And these are some of the reactions you could get. And so while a lot of people think I've made my selection and now, when is go live, so many things happen during that implementation that aren't technical and they're really personal, that leaders need to understand. And again, back to putting a plan together, thinking through the plan, understanding the risks that reside, the biases that reside within the teams, the resistance that's there, being able to put plans against those initiatives and those elements that really exist within an organization, and then work the plan. And so, that's one of the fun things, and it's not fun for everybody, but it's one of the fun things I love working on, just because it helps people understand that these are the critical points within the implementation that you have to bring the team along, and you have to really do some work on the people side to understand if those people in those positions are the right people in the future positions, and if they're not, what are the other areas that you might place them with an organizational change or a new organizational structure if you value that person and the things that they bring to the table. And so some of those conversations, like the communication plans and the training, things like that, are exciting because people understand what they're going to do to enable that change. And then some of the, I would say, like more challenging conversations that every organization is going to have to go through is how do the people in our current mix fit this future organization? And they're tough conversations, but as a third party helping leaders, prepare for those conversations, I think that we become trusted partners of our clients to ensure that they know how to have those conversations. We kind of go through some scenarios. They understand scenarios. They can describe those scenarios to their team members, and they have people who've gone through it before to help them with that. So I know that's a long-winded answer, Braden, to what you're saying. I'm like, what are you seeing, and how do you see this really playing out? But I think, it's all important. The people, the process, and the technology, and the people and the process and changing those, in my experience, have proven more difficult than picking a new software provider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, Tony. You had something to say there.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with all of Allison's points, and these digital transformations never fail because of the technology. They don't. They fail because of the ability or lack of the ability to continually have a project that's based on. I'm going to go back to your words earlier. This business alignment. I often find that when you get into these digital transformations, I like to call it the Bible, but a lot of folks don't have the Bible or the charter that says, well, why did we start this up to begin with, right? And what happens is they begin to lose their course, because that business alignment is your compass that keeps you on course. Because what happens with these digital transformations, most of them are multi-month, and some of them may be, beyond 12 months. And what happens is your business starts to change. We know in this day and age, our business and things are going on rapidly. The pandemic just changed a whole lot of things for a whole lot of people within the last 12 months about how we conduct business. So, you start up a digital transformation initiative, and all of a sudden things are changing. So you now have to not only have something that keeps you on course, your compass, which is your alignment and why you're doing this project, but then you also now have to set yourself up. So I kind of go into, that's the kind of the pre-planning kinds of stuff, right? Now I've got to say, okay, so now that I'm into this transformation, what are all the tools and techniques that I have in place that's going to enable me to react to change? Because it's going to happen. You now have to build your methods and your tools for digital transformation around anticipated change, so that when it happens, you're not just reacting, but in some cases you're predicting, and you even have the ability to simulate the change, so that when it happens, you can know what the outcomes of the impact might be if you're in the midst of a digital transformation kinds of project. And so I think a lot of clients, what they don't necessarily do, and they look for us to help them with that, is how do I set the foundation? How do I get started? How do I make sure that I understand why I'm conducting this digital transformation? I want KPIs, and I want to be able to tie it back to, I want the actual down to a fairly deep solution to say, if I've got, 50 requirements, I want to be able to say, well, if I got to pick and choose what's mandatory, what's not mandatory, I have some kind of scorecard that allows me to do that. So if I got to pick and choose, because, sometimes we have to segment these projects and break them up into partitions, because maybe timetables change, again, here we go, that change word. So there's a lot of things that are critical. The upfront planning, the ability to build the mechanisms in place that allow me to change. And then I'm going to kind of throw one other element, which is kind of what Allison was talking about too, which is expectation setting, which is so important on these projects, because as things change, expectations change, and so now we have to be able to manage that. And that whole organizational change is part of that expectation setting too, because now I need to be able to communicate what's going to happen, what's the impact, and how is it going to, because everybody's going to, the question is, what's in it for me? It's always what's in it for me when you're in these type of projects. So when I go into a project, Braden, I'm looking for several things. One is what's the business alignment? I'm usually looking for a charter. Charter usually says someone thought about it and laid it all out, and I've tied it to the or a particular solution or set of solutions. Then I look for a project management plan that really talks about, well, how am I going to do this thing when I start it up? And someone put some thought. You'd be surprised how many organizations don't have it, don't put thought into it, and they end up with a project that starts to run out of control, either from the standpoint of just not being able to control the work or not be able to control the expectations. So I'll stop and let some other folks talk. But those are some of the things that I'm looking for when I go to these types of projects and so forth.
And Tony, I really liked earlier in your answer, you put a heavy emphasis on the word why. And I think when you're going through a project like this, you have to keep asking yourself and asking your people and thinking through the why of the project. And oftentimes, leaders find themselves going down a path and not stopping to ask themselves why, or asking if their people understand the why behind the decisions that are made. Mm-hmm. And that communication piece, and circling back to the original question, Braden, that's what people is the most important part of this whole process. When you're looking at the why behind technology, our technology is old. When you're looking behind the why behind process, our process doesn't make sense anymore. We're getting new technology. The why for people is a multi-layered, way more complex question and answer. It's something that needs to be considered at every step throughout the project, and making sure that's thoughtfully communicated to your people.
Yeah, I think those are really good points. The thing that comes to my mind is the vendors and partners are part of that people equation too, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think sometimes that's part of the challenge is I think we can look internally as an organization, or the company can look at the change that they have to go through, and the vendor and the partners have to go through that as well with the client. So talk a little bit about some of the, we've talked about timelines, changes, and the technology not necessarily being the direct cause all the time. But just the nature of the team dynamics and the changes that occur within a team. I think that's so critical to the success of a project over the life of a project. People come and go, or the team grows, or the team downsizes. And it largely, it's due to the nature of change in the course of a project, but also we have operational field concerns, I think, that sometimes take precedent over what we need to do in the back office. And so the team sometimes is more field facing, and we don't get our time in the back office. So talk about some of those challenges.
I can go first on this one. Kind of talk about a failure that we had and how we are going to plan on navigating that in the future. For one of my clients, she wasn't a key decision maker, but she had really heavy influence on the project that we were working. It was a CRM selection project. Mm-hmm. And she went on maternity leave, and we knew that was going to happen, but I don't think it was communicated very well between our organization and the client, just how important of a role she played in the selection and getting people's buy-in and understanding, how she fit into the equation. And it was crazy. One person being gone for, what is a normal thing in life, almost derailed the project entirely. So I think understanding your key players and sitting down and understanding, who has influence in your organization and who's going to be important is so important to understand up front, so that then you're able to navigate those issues. And, we're not going to ask her to not go on maternity leave. That is, not something that we would ever want to do. But, understanding, how are you planning to backfill? Who's going to make the decisions? And really have that well thought out in advance is something that we have moved forward to do, having learned that lesson the hard way.
Yeah. Mitch brings up a story. And as soon as I start talking about this, Alice is going to chime in here too. But, one of the critical aspects of any digital transformation, especially from the client perspective, is setting an expectation that the direction and the success of the solution is highly dependent upon the client themselves, and not the consulting organization that they're going to bring in. Because all too often what you do is you see clients just toss the keys to the car over to the consulting organization to do their digital transformation. And what happens is they end up getting it wrong because they don't know the business as well as the client does. So a real critical success to these implementations of whatever the digital transformation is that the client needs to make sure that they have the right players with the right amount of time involved in the project. Because too often we see clients not dedicating the resources, and what happens is, I've got my day job, but I can't do the implementation too, and so it's not a part-time job. And so the expectation has to be, when you do any type of digital transformation that has any significance to your company, is you need to put the right people on it full time for whatever aspect of the project they're involved in, so that they're committed, and you're getting the value from the client side that's necessary to achieve success. And that's real critical. Too often you just see so many clients who just don't think that they can afford to put people on the project dedicated, but they can't afford not to. So,
double-edged sword. I know Tony and I have worked on a couple projects where this has been the case, and we kind of take it back to basics. All right, here's the RACI of all the people who are responsible, accountable, consulted, involved in this project. Here are the hours over the life cycle, over the implementation life, and this is going to be your critical weeks. And so let's talk about who these people are in your organization.
mm-hmm.
Do you have people who can play these roles, who can take on this capacity? And if you can't, how do you backfill? And we had a really interesting conversation with a client that we worked on at the end of last year, is what does that backfill plan look like
Mm-hmm.
for these roles? And can your team support it? We're working with a manufacturer and in a commodity industry, and their business was booming. I mean, it was just like never had a year like that. And they were recognizing we have to put in a new ERP. And so, we knew that that small but mighty team, their plate was already full,
Mm-hmm.
and we're now going to layer on an ERP. And so when we talked about that, if there were some instances where they couldn't backfill, then it was, who could we hire to free up this person?
Mm-hmm.
And does your ERP need to actually be delayed on that implementation until your team has the capability to do it?
Mm-hmm.
And one group did delay it. They said, you know what, we can't take this on right now. We've got to wait until our the valley in our business, and we will hire so that we can take on this implementation in our low season. And back to the timeline, yeah, we would have loved to have gone faster, but it wasn't the right thing for the business. And so that's definitely something that if anybody on the line is considering, is can your team actually take on more?
Right.
And if they can't, right now, what is that plan to take on this initiative? Because you will need subject matter experts and key decision makers available for this to be successful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I think backfilling's a common challenge. I think digital transformation, or most of our projects, I think, fall into somewhere in the life cycle of change of the business. So by that I mean, typically, it's not uncommon for us to engage and find that there are significant gaps in the organizational structure, or needs for new business, or some kind of activity in the life cycle, like M&A or some change in the business. So it's interesting. How do you guys approach your projects in terms of filling that need? Allison, you mentioned putting the project on hold, or pausing a project. I think that's a real challenge, especially if a project's in mid-flight. How do you all typically counsel your clients or advise in terms of how we're going to fill those resource needs?
Well, I'll take a shot at it, Allison. I think first of all, it's just, there's got to be a lot of education at first, and I think with third stage, as we're going through some of our workshops, what happens is they start to get a little bit of a feel for the involvement, because we're already pressing, right, on the involvement. This is prior, this is pre-implementation, right? We're in an implementation readiness assessment, and we're already demanding time, and so they get a little taste of it. If they don't believe you, they get a little taste of it during the implementation readiness exercise, and you start to see, that was, for us, that was a red flag that there's a problem, right? If you're pushing back now, what are you going to do when you get into an implementation project and you're doing this in an implementation readiness exercise? So one is educate. Two is then give them a little taste of it as you're taking them through maybe some type of assessment to help them out and to get them prepped. And to continue to preach it. You got to really preach it. But I think the real telltale for them was when we started to demand the time of the subject matter expertise, and we couldn't avoid doing it because you own the knowledge and we don't. We're trying to get it from you. They very quickly realized this is a real dilemma for us, right? And this particular client, they actually made the right decision, I think, for them at this point, which is to delay the implementation project, because they realized that to do this right, they were going to have to step up and put the right people in. One of the other strategies, Braden, that we suggested to them too was they were concerned about some of their management team getting too involved in an implementation project, right? But the management team was necessary to be involved in the implementation readiness. So one of the strategies we suggested was, well, maybe you take a lower level, maybe middle manager person who's an operational level person, that's not as senior, who can dedicate the time to an implementation project, get them exposed during the implementation readiness in preparation for a full-time role as part of an implementation team. That way, a senior executive who may not have the time or would have to could transition to someone who's more suited from a time perspective during an implementation. So that was one strategy we came up with. So,
yeah, Tony, I think you addressed. Dom had asked a question: how do you persuade the management teams that this is important? Definitely education, but testing the waters with some mini exercises and assessments. We have a large tool set that we have on our team that can kind of give them a taste of what that's going to look like. And even just quantifying it, we took up this much time, and this is a smaller portion of what it's going to require in implementation. And so that's one way that we do it. Braden, you had asked, how do we, take that pause, and sometimes we fill the pause with different activities. We can help them negotiate some of their contract terms, or really laying out the accelerators that can be with the vendor, with the software vendor. For this particular client, we explored the areas that we knew were going to be changing. We looked at what that would look like in the software, so that they could do some conference room pilots, and the team could get comfortable with the solution before the implementation actually started. So, we can get really creative with ways to, depending on the vendors, like the software providers, in this case, they were able to do that. They were set up in that way where they could do some conference room pilots on the big changes that were going to help in the business. And in those conference room pilots, not only was that a sense of training for our client, but it also was validation that the solution was going to deliver what the team wanted. And it also served as a little bit of an incentive for the client to free up those resources to get the solution in. So, there's no one size fits all. We have a methodology, we have an approach, we've got some really fantastic tools, but once we learn the client, their situation, their business situation, and their timelines, then we can kind of put those tools together to help the client along their journey.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's all. Sorry, Mitch.
I was just going to say real quick, just building on that, we have such an experienced team here and so many consultants that have seen so many different scenarios that, we can really find red flags pretty quickly. And I feel like that's a huge advantage that we bring to the table, in addition to our process and things that we do with our clients on a regular basis. If you've seen something like this happen before, it's easy to go and say, hey, from experience, you're going to want to fix this. And being able to have that candid conversation about what has happened previously goes a long way. Learn from other people's mistakes is huge.
Yeah, I agree. I think, Allison, you mentioned CRPs. I think, it's always interesting to me when a conference room pilot or some kind of test case in a process, it's an opportunity for an aha moment, right? Mm-hmm. So I think a lot of times we encounter or experience some grumbling in sessions because we know that the change is painful at first, but when the process is stepped through and there's that opportunity to see things in a new process or the future state, kind of in reality, that's always exciting when it becomes a transformational moment, right? Where they say, "Oh, this is going to save me a ton of time," right? And you say, "Great, well now you can participate in the rest of the sessions."
Yep.
So I think that it really is a challenge. I know timing in terms of things like busy season, for example. It's really difficult, I think, to get participation at first, but as the project progresses, it becomes less difficult, I think.
Braden, I think the message that you have to send, one of the messages you have to send when you're doing a digital transformation that's going to result in a fairly significant implementation project, is that you've got to say one of the criteria is you're going to have a dedicated team, and there's no way to get around it. You're going to have a dedicated team of folks, and it can be different dedication depending on where you are in the process, right? But certainly, one of the biggest failures to digital transformations around functional implementations is that we don't get the requirements right? So you want the subject matter experts involved early on, because the cost goes up as you get further downstream on these digital transformation projects, because if you get the requirement right, the design's wrong. And the design's wrong, if there's some development work, the development is wrong, or the configuration of the application is wrong. And you get down to testing and you discover the requirement is wrong, not the design, but the requirement is wrong. Now you got to recycle, and now that cost is getting revisited again. So it's better to put the time up front. And I tell folks, if you got your business folks, get them involved, make them 100%, put the best people who understand the business as part of the team. And they may be critical to the success of your business too, but you're not here making a digital change because you just want to play footsie. You're here because you're trying to make an impact to your business, or you're trying to avoid some threats to your business that you are being confronted with. Whichever the case, it's important. So take it as being important. So.
Yeah, and I think you and Dom kind of touched on a very similar point in the chat. Asking for your business to be involved and for them to take part. They are part of the team and very important part of the team. Oftentimes people view digital transformation as an IT function. And really, the way that I like to look at these things is the technology is enabling your business. So it's so important that your business folks are involved in understanding how the technology is going to change how they do their jobs. I would say it's almost more of a business project than an IT project when you're looking at some of these transformations.
And I think that's an important aspect of it too. If you've got a project with a steering committee with C-level or VP level folks on it, it's important. And so you gotta treat it like it's an important part of your business. It's not just a tech. See, this is the other thing too. We got to be careful with these digital transformations because they're not just technology exercises. This is your business. This is a business change. This is not a technology change. Technology is just the enabler. And I think people somehow want to discount technology when we're talking about how to improve and make our business better. And there's that perception that this is not as important because it's not the business, but yeah, it is the business. So
Technology is how the business gets done.
Yep.
Yeah. And you guys are talking, I just got to share a situation that I'm in right now for one of my clients. We have the business really involved, really driving it. They're doing a great job, but the business doesn't have the technical experience. And I'm not kidding. We have somebody on our steering team who thought in the beginning that we were going to select our vendor, and the next month we were going live, because that's how it works on our phones. You do an update and you install the solution, you select all of the requirements, and voila, you've got a new app. And and so it was I think the IT folks were like, see, this is what we're dealing with, this is what we're dealing with from the business side. They just think it's so simple. And they are at the table, but they didn't understand how long it was going to take to actually put in a new human capital management system, and how it, there's so many different integrations that need to take place, and it's going to be months of work. And so I just had to share that situation with you, because I think that's one thing that a lot of businesses do throw it over to IT to manage those technical elements, but in expectation setting, I mean, it's going to take a lot longer to put in an HCM. And while functional experts know what they need, they don't necessarily always understand how long it's going to take to get that.
Yeah, true. I think there's always a distinction between a project and a program, right? Or I think, as you mentioned, Tony, a business initiative. And I think at various stages in the life cycle, it kind of crosses between project to program and back again, and so on and so forth. But I guess setting that expectation at the top is really important. And how do you guys feel? How often do you feel that the message is consistent throughout the life of a program? To me, it feels that the message can evolve, but sometimes it tapers off kind of in the middle of the project, and it needs a little lift or a little reinforcement. How do you guys approach that?
I think it's why you do so much work up front on the alignment, on the messaging, on the communication plans, because you're putting all of those together when you're excited.
Yeah.
And that's why that plan is so exciting to put together in the beginning, is because that's when you've got the energy, and then you just work your plan and come back to the plan and revise it at certain checkpoints. Milestones are put into any project for a reason, just to ensure that all parties are on the same page. If messaging needs to change, if timeline needs to change, you have something to update. You've already got your rough draft of your communication plan that you'd put together in the beginning when everything was, on track, right? And then things happen that get off track, but at least you just are going to revise it, and you're not creating in the moment. And so I think if you have that going in, you have that alignment, you put your communication plans together, I think it's easier to be consistent and for the long haul of your project.
Yeah, to piggyback off Allison, I think it's important that you put the time in the beginning of your projects, to make sure that all the elements of a digital transformation in place. And I'm just going to focus on the communication plan, because, if you're not putting thought into how you're going to conduct these projects, then somewhere along the line, you're going to have failures because you didn't address something, that you didn't spend the time to lay the foundation for how you're going to, manage certain things like communication. And Braden, I like the fact that, what you said was a lot of times these projects do get to a point when you're in these cycles where there's a lull or it gets a little boring and that sort of thing. And that's where it comes back to understanding, building a plan, understanding the culture, Alice, I'm going to come back to another client again. You come back to a culture that says, I understand the culture of a particular client, and maybe there's some aspects of this client that can be leveraged because they approach things in a certain way. We have one client, and they have a culture of making the job fun and communication fun. So, again, you take those things into consideration when you build your communication plan. You build that kind of stuff in there. So you make it fun. You get a milestone, some big celebration. Maybe it coincides around, some, important date, but you do those kinds of things. So you keep the excitement, and you reward, and you make things rewarding. So it's a lot of little things you can do in the communication plan. But I think the main thing is you got to sit down, think about it. You got to anticipate a certain aspect of the culture that might buy into it, and you continuously communicate and make it fun. So those are some of the things you can do when you're in the ho-hum of a project kind of thing, right?
Yeah, I agree. So, it's interesting. All of our projects have, I think, their own culture. Tony, it's whether sometimes it's set out intentional, and that can be in part by the client culture, as you mentioned, keeping it fun. But then also, I think each team, because its unique project brings its own culture. What do you guys like to do sometimes to kind of establish a culture or to keep it fun, as you mentioned, Tony? What are some of the things you do to kind of keep the client engaged and focused? I mean, there is a real factor of fatigue on a lot of these projects. How do you try and head that off?
For me, it is about trying to understand the people. I've run big, long projects that can take a long time, right? I'm from the age of older, longer projects. So I kind of know sometimes what some of the longer projects can do to folks. And I just think that, you focus on communication, you focus on the things that are important to the culture. You focus on what's important and that motivates, because, in a positive motivation, right? Because, the negative motivation, we get that kind of stuff all the time. I think it's important that we focus on positives in communication and that sort of thing. But I can't stress that just understanding the folks, the culture that you're dealing with, it helps, because if you apply the wrong techniques to the wrong environment, you're going to get the kind of results that you're looking for. And if I can segue into another area, which is kind of important around culture too, this is really important because I was confronted with this recently as well, is the culture of choosing the right consulting partner. I had a client the other day. We presented them with a list of potential consulting partners for an implementation. And there was some pushback, I think, on the list. And so one of the questions that I raised to the executive was, so what are you looking for? And they thought that was kind of a stupid question. And I was like, well, we can go check all the boxes off. I mean, and most companies are going to have all the boxes checked, right? Consulting partners. But at the end of the day, what are you looking for? And it comes back to that whole cultural question, which is in your partners, in your team, in your organization, what are you looking for, and what works best, and what makes everybody fit a little bit better. So.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah, just recently had to recommend a bunch of SIs for software providers that were moving forward in a selection process. And, like Tony said, you could go with any of the big guys. You could, like, any of them are going to be able to say, we've done this before, we've implemented it, we've had success, here our clients have gone live. But it comes back to understanding that client and understanding their culture and saying, we recognize this about your culture. They might like that. They might not like that aspect. But we as partners have to kind of be the mirror for them. Like, we recognize this in your culture. We think this is what's going to fit you best for XYZ reasons. You know, they said that they have worked on these types of clients. They look like you. They have these types of aspects in the benefits that they give to their employees. So do you. And so making those connection points, I think, are really important. And if there are aspects about their culture that you know they're trying to change, having that open dialogue with, you know, with your executive sponsor, with your project manager, or the team lead, I think is something that that I always try to do. Making that personal connection is definitely something that's going to help everybody out, rather than just, I think there's a common to reverting to the old style approach of, you know, I'm the client, I'm always right, you're to do the work. And in a lot of aspects, you know, as a third party coming in, helping out on a initiative, the client is always right, but we're going to give them ideas and suggestions and recommendations to make the project better for everybody that we've talked to on their team. And as a third party, there are benefits that we get. We hear a lot of you know, off the cuff conversation with clients during focus groups or during requirements gathering meetings, and so we get a lot of the pain points. And it's always helpful for, you know, leadership who might not be sitting in on those conversations to just see, like, here are all the comments. They're anonymous. They're, you know, they're raw, but here they are. And now we can understand a little bit about this culture. And if you want to fix some things, here are some recommendations on that. And so I do think Third Stage, and a lot of you guys on the call, we've all put ourselves out there to be like, hey, like, you're a great business, you're a great client. Let me help you understand your team and the challenges that they're going through. And if you're looking to change their culture, here are some things you can do. And so that's just some of the things that I think are helpful. And I don't necessarily know that a lot of the executive sponsors that I work with just in the short recent future have that raw information, and they're like, okay, thanks. Like, I needed that. It's not fun, but, you know, nobody's going to tell me that. Nobody's going to flat out tell me that, what they wrote in your survey. And so that's one of those things that I think they're appreciative of.
Yeah, and there's so much value coming in as an outsider and being able to give to those executives. You know, a lot of times we find that folks have been in their role for a really long time, and, you know, they see things the way that they see them, and really helping to block that tunnel vision and open them up to what we see. It is always a fun experience. Not always easy, but there's a lot of value and fresh perspective.
Yeah. Hey, Braden, I saw a question pop up. I was going to try to answer it if I could. The one on the culture and collaborative versus adversarial.
Yeah, please.
Okay, yeah. My first thought is, you know, first of all, the consulting firm, SI to client relationship sometimes can be just by nature adversarial, but that doesn't mean it have to be adversarial. It's, you know, I think it's a natural thing to do that, right? But you don't have to kind of totally give into that. My best experiences, not only as a project manager, but also in observing successful projects, has been the one where the client and a consulting firm were more collaborative, with more transparency. And I actually found when you have projects that spun out of control a little bit and they were kind of runaways, the only way you were going to get them back under control if they were a runaway project was that the teams have to say, okay, we're going to be a little bit more transparent. We got to fix this. And so we're going to open up and how to make this thing work. And we're going to tell some truths to one another about what we see and what we think is the right course of action to take. So to try to answer the question, I don't think that reverting to an adversarial style is the best approach. you only compound and make things worse by doing that. I do believe, coming back to culture, it's important that when you choose an SI, because some of the SIs have a style about them too. That's another reason why it's important to choose the right SI versus what your culture is. Some of them have a stronger personality than others. Some of them tend to want to take very, strong-handed, very much control of the projects. And so you've got to understand the SI and their personality and the culture so that you can match it up. Because if you can't match it up, then you are going to have a little bit more of an adversarial circumstance because just your personalities are clashing. So that's why it's important to choose that the right SI. But again, you're choosing so that you can have that more of a collaborative approach as opposed to an adversarial approach. So,
yeah, I always use building a team. It's, do I want this person on my team or not? And that extends a long way. And I think that's where I found my most successful projects to be, is the ones that really link up well and they feel like we're driving towards a mutual goal as a team together.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. That's a great point. I think about the SIs having their own culture, and we're all familiar with kind of which SIs bring which culture and
Right.
the like. But certainly I think that is part of the job in terms of making successful projects, is keeping our ears, eyes, and everything else open to thought and suggestion in terms of getting the team all on the same page.
Right.
And it looks like we're running out of time here. Are we? Do we still have time?
That flashing sign at the Grammys, 5-minute warning here.
The music's playing, right?
Right.
Yeah, gotta get the hook.
But it's a no. You don't want that. But if you wouldn't mind just giving some final thoughts for today, you guys are the last session, so we'd love to hear any kind of last minute recommendations that you may have.
I like the comments about do your work up front. I think those are good closing comments for me.
Yeah, absolutely. We heard that in a variety of sessions today, right? How important that is from all aspects of really going through a whole and coordinated digital transformation. So
yeah, the second one, I was going to throw one more in there, one more to leave with, which is to expect change and manage to change, because it's going to happen. So you just got to put the things in place to be able to predict and model and react to it faster.
Absolutely. Change management is so important. Another huge aspect of making sure you're successful with any sort of transformation. So thank you all for your time and insight. And we look forward to seeing some of you tomorrow. Really enjoyed this conversation. We got great feedback from the audience. So we're very grateful for all of your insights. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Good to see everybody.
Thank you. Yeah, absolutely. So we have a few just closing items today, and then I'll pass it over to Eric for just a few words. So just a reminder, this sort of workshop type of format is what we will be doing tomorrow, because we do have those consecutive workshops going at one time. So we'll be using that schedule function quite a bit in tomorrow's workshop, where you can pick one or go to another, depending on what you want to do. We would like to offer this group, since you were so engaging, and we appreciate that today, as a free companion pass for tomorrow. These breakout sessions really work well when you are doing it with your colleagues or your teams or your clients or whomever. So if you would like to redeem that, we do have a promo code that we will put in this chat box as well. It's just TCS free. So that's basically what it is. All one word, all capitalized, but I'll pop it in the chat box as well down there. So if you do have any feedback, we'll do our poll in the morning as we're going through all this. And just a reminder that each session will be on the recording, and the playback is available through that schedule function as well. So thank you all for joining today, and we look forward to seeing everyone tomorrow. With that, I'll pass it to Eric for any final closing thoughts while I pop that promo code in our chat box here.
Yeah, thanks, Kyler, and thanks, Braden, Allison, Mitch, and Tony for the great discussion there at the end. That was super interesting, and that's an example of one of the sessions I always learn a lot from every time I hear that. You never know what you're going to get into and what direction it'll go, so we always get some good conversation out of those. So I appreciate you guys all being here, as well as the other speakers that were on earlier today, and certainly thanks to the audience here for being here and sticking around for a full day of stuff today. What we're going to do tomorrow is, as Kyler mentioned, I see she just popped the promo code up if you want to bring a companion from your organization or a peer that you think might be interested in the content. The whole idea there is that the way we structured tomorrow's agenda is we tried our best to make each session that's running in parallel, make them somewhat different to where they're not overlapping too much. But having said that, there's going to be inevitably some situations where you might want to attend both sessions, and you'll certainly get the recordings, but it might be good to have another team member that can join, especially if they have a specific interest in, say, HR or supply chain, for example. Those are two very specific topics we have tomorrow. Mergers and acquisitions is another one, just as a few examples. So that's the plan for tomorrow. And tomorrow, again, will be a lot of sort of a combination of what you saw today, a combination of PowerPoint, sort of traditional PowerPoint presentations, but then also panel discussions, and then some sort of hybrids where we have some PowerPoint, some panel discussion in the same session. So it'll be, we'll try to mix it up for you guys so it's not getting monotonous or anything throughout the day, and certainly a good variety of speakers. Some of them you've already seen, and there's actually a few new speakers that you haven't seen yet tomorrow. Actually, several of them, Brian Potts and Christy Barber, you have not met yet. They're going to talk about a comparison of leading technologies and ERP systems, HCM systems in the marketplace, and HCM systems as well. We'll have Dominic Lynn, who's from our UK office, works with Stuart out of the UK. He's going to be here co-facilitating a session on supply chain. And then what was the other name I saw? Cameron Carpenter is one of our team members. He's going to be on a panel discussion late in the day tomorrow. Wayne Holtham, who's the head of our office in Brisbane, Australia, is going to do a session on managing global and large-scale transformation. So those are just a few examples of some of the new speakers and some of the different topics we'll have for tomorrow. And with that being said, we've gone a bit over here today, so appreciate everyone's time and attendance here today, and engagement and questions and all that good stuff, and look forward to seeing you all tomorrow.